Have you ever wondered why some people seem to destroy their own success right when things start going well? Maybe you've seen someone finally get a great opportunity, only to procrastinate, make excuses, or somehow mess everything up. Maybe you've watched a talented person stay stuck in the same place year after year, despite having all the potential in the world. Or maybe that person is you. Here's a shocking truth. Most people are not held back by a lack of intelligence, talent, money, or opportunity. They're held back by themselves. Think about that for a moment. The biggest obstacle standing between you and the life you want might not be your boss, your circumstances, your past, or even bad luck. It might be your own subconscious patterns. And the scary part is that most people don't even realize they're doing it. Every year, millions of people set goals. They promise themselves that this will be the year they finally change. They decide they'll get healthier, build a business, improve their relationships, become more confident, or pursue their dreams. Yet a few months later, most of those goals disappear. The motivation fades. The excuses return. The old habits take over. And life goes back to exactly the way it was before. Why does this happen? Why do we keep getting in our own way? Why do we sabotage the very things we claim to want? These are the questions explored in one of the most powerful self-improvement books of recent years, The Mountain Is You by Brianna Wiest. This isn't a book about productivity hacks. It's not a book about motivation. And it's definitely not a book filled with quick fixes. Instead, it's a deep exploration of human behavior. It reveals why we self-sabotage, why we stay stuck, and most importantly, how we can finally break free. The title itself contains a powerful message. The mountain is you. Not your circumstances. Not your past. Not other people. You. At first, that idea might sound uncomfortable. Most people don't like hearing that they might be responsible for their own suffering. But Brianna Wiest argues that this realization is actually incredibly empowering. Because if you're the problem, you can also become the solution. Imagine standing at the bottom of a massive mountain. The peak represents the life you want. Confidence. Success. Freedom. Peace. Happiness. Growth. Everything you've ever dreamed about is waiting at the top. Most people spend their lives believing the mountain is outside of them. They blame the economy. They blame their childhood. They blame other people. They blame circumstances. But according to this book, the real mountain is within. The fears. The limiting beliefs. The emotional wounds. The destructive habits. The unconscious patterns. Those are the true obstacles. And until you overcome them, no amount of external success will ever feel enough. Think about someone who constantly wants a better relationship but keeps choosing the wrong partners. Or someone who dreams of financial freedom but continues making poor financial decisions. Or someone who wants confidence but never takes action because they're afraid of failure. These people don't lack information. They already know what they should do. The problem isn't knowledge. The problem is self-sabotage. And that's exactly where this book begins. Brianna Wiest explains that self-sabotage is not evidence that you're lazy, broken, or incapable. It's often evidence that part of you is trying to protect yourself. The problem is that your subconscious mind doesn't always know the difference between safety and growth. It prefers what's familiar, even if what's familiar is painful. This creates one of the strangest paradoxes in human psychology. People often stay attached to situations they dislike simply because those situations are predictable. The unknown feels more threatening than the familiar, even when the familiar is making them miserable. Think about how many people stay in jobs they hate, relationships that don't fulfill them, habits that damage them, mindsets that limit them. Not because they enjoy those things, but because change feels uncomfortable. And that discomfort is where self-sabotage begins. As we continue through this summary, you're going to discover why your mind works this way, how emotional patterns secretly shape your life, and what you can do to finally overcome the internal obstacles standing between you and the future you deserve. Because once you understand the mountain within you, everything begins to change. And what you'll learn next may completely transform the way you see yourself. Most people think self-sabotage is a lack of discipline. They believe they procrastinate because they're lazy. They believe they stay stuck because they don't want success badly enough. They believe they fail because they simply aren't trying hard enough. But Brianna Wiest challenges this idea completely. According to her, self-sabotage isn't usually a discipline problem. It's an emotional problem. And that's a huge difference. Imagine a person who wants to lose weight. They buy healthy food. They join a gym. They make a plan. Everything looks perfect. But a few weeks later, they're back to old habits. Most people would say they lacked willpower. But what if something deeper was happening? What if part of them was using food as comfort? What if eating helped them escape stress, anxiety, loneliness, or emotional pain? In that case, the problem isn't really food. The problem is the emotional need underneath it. And until that emotional need is addressed, the behavior will keep returning. This is one of the most important lessons in the entire book. Self-sabotage is often a coping mechanism. It's a strategy your mind developed to protect you at some point in your life. The problem is that many coping mechanisms stop being useful. Yet we continue using them anyway. Think about someone who fears rejection. Maybe they experienced painful rejection years ago. Now every time new opportunity appears, they hesitate. They avoid taking risks. They avoid putting themselves out there. From the outside, it looks like they're holding themselves back. But internally, their mind is trying to keep them safe. The subconscious says, if you don't try, you can't fail. If you don't risk rejection, you can't get hurt. The strategy protects them from pain. But it also prevents growth. And that's exactly how self-sabotage works. It's protection that becomes limitation. Safety that becomes a prison. The difficult truth is that your subconscious mind values familiarity more than happiness. Read that again. Your subconscious mind often prefers familiar pain over unfamiliar success. That's why people repeatedly recreate the same patterns. The same toxic relationships. The same financial struggles. The same confidence issues. The same destructive habits. Because those patterns feel known. And what feels known feels safe. Even when it's harmful. Let's imagine someone who has always struggled with self-worth. Deep down, they don't believe they're good enough. Now imagine they suddenly receive an amazing opportunity. A promotion. A new relationship. A chance to start a business. You might expect them to feel excited. But surprisingly, they may feel anxious. Because success conflicts with their internal identity. Part of them doesn't believe they deserve it. So they procrastinate. They hesitate, they make mistakes. They create excuses. Not consciously. Subconsciously. They sabotage the opportunity because success feels unfamiliar. This is why Brianna Wiest emphasizes that lasting change requires more than changing behavior. You must change identity. If you continue seeing yourself as the same person, you'll continue creating the same results. Your habits follow your beliefs. Your actions follow your identity. Your life follows your patterns. This realization can feel uncomfortable. But it's also incredibly powerful. Because it means transformation is possible. If patterns were learned, they can be unlearned. If beliefs were created, they can be changed. If behaviors were developed, they can be replaced. Nothing is permanent. Another reason self-sabotage is so difficult to recognize is because it often disguises itself as logic. A person might say, "I'm not ready yet. I'll start next month. I need more information first. The timing isn't right." Sometimes those statements are true. But often they're fear wearing the mask of reason. Fear sounds intelligent. Fear sounds practical. Fear sounds convincing. That's why it fools so many people. Years can pass while someone waits for the perfect moment, the perfect opportunity, the perfect conditions, the perfect version of themselves. But perfection never arrives. And life keeps moving. One of the most powerful ideas in The Mountain Is You is that awareness is the beginning of freedom. You cannot change a pattern you don't recognize. You cannot heal a wound you refuse to acknowledge. You cannot solve a problem you pretend doesn't exist. The moment you become aware of your self-sabotaging behaviors, something changes. You stop being controlled by them. You begin observing them. And observation creates choice. Instead of automatically reacting, you can consciously respond. Instead of repeating old patterns, you can create new ones. This is where real transformation begins. Not with motivation. Not with inspiration. But with awareness. Because awareness shines a light into places that were previously hidden. And once those hidden patterns become visible, they lose much of their power. But awareness alone isn't enough. There's another question we must answer. If self-sabotage is driven by fear, emotional conditioning, and subconscious patterns, why do those patterns become so strong in the first place? Why do people stay trapped in cycles that clearly aren't serving them? Why do they continue choosing comfort over growth? Why do they remain stuck even when they desperately want change? The answer lies in something almost every human being struggles with. The fear of change. Have you ever noticed how strange human behavior can be? People say they want change, yet they resist it. They say they want success, yet they avoid opportunities. They say they want a better life, yet they keep repeating the same patterns. At first glance, it doesn't make sense. But when you understand how the brain works, everything becomes clearer. Your brain has one primary job: keep you alive. Not make you successful. Not make you wealthy. Not make you confident. Keep you safe. And from your brain's perspective, safe usually means familiar. This creates a major problem. Because growth requires entering the unknown. Think about every major positive change you've ever experienced. Starting a new job. Moving to a new city. Beginning a relationship. Launching a business. Learning a skill. Speaking in public. Every one of those experiences involved uncertainty. And uncertainty often triggers fear. The brain interprets unfamiliar situations as potential threats. As a result, it encourages you to stay where you are. Even if where you are isn't making you happy, this is what people call the comfort zone. But Brianna Wiest explains that comfort zones are often misunderstood. They aren't always comfortable. Many people live inside comfort zones that make them miserable. They stay in situations they dislike. They tolerate problems they could solve. They remain trapped in habits they hate. Not because they're comfortable. Because they're familiar. There's a huge difference. Imagine someone working at a job they hate. Every morning feels stressful. Every day feels draining. Every week feels exhausting. Yet they never leave. Why? Because the pain they know feels safer than the uncertainty they don't know. The same thing happens in relationships. Some people remain in unhealthy relationships for years, not because they're happy, but because the idea of starting over feels terrifying. The familiar pain becomes easier than the unfamiliar possibility. This is one of the biggest reasons people stay stuck. They wait until circumstances force them to change, instead of choosing change voluntarily. And unfortunately, that often makes the process much harder. Brianna introduces another powerful concept: limiting beliefs. These are invisible rules you've created about yourself and the world. Many of them were formed years ago. Sometimes during childhood. Sometimes after painful experiences. Sometimes after failures. And over time, these beliefs become part of your identity. The dangerous part is that most people don't even realize they're there. Imagine someone who secretly believes they're not smart enough. They may never say those words out loud. But the belief influences everything. When opportunities appear, they hesitate. When challenges arise, they doubt themselves. When success becomes possible, they feel uncomfortable. Their actions constantly reinforce the belief. Then the results seem to confirm it. The cycle continues. The belief creates behavior. The behavior creates results. The results strengthen the belief. This loop can continue for decades, unless it's interrupted. Another common limiting belief is the idea that success requires suffering. Many people unconsciously believe they must struggle constantly to deserve achievement. As a result, they create unnecessary obstacles. They overcomplicate simple things. They reject easier solutions. They make life harder than it needs to be. Because deep down, struggle feels familiar. And familiarity feels safe. This is why awareness is so important. You cannot change beliefs you don't recognize. The moment you identify a limiting belief, you begin separating yourself from it. Instead of saying, "I am not good enough," you start asking, "Where did this belief come from?" That question changes everything. Because beliefs are not facts. They are stories. And stories can be rewritten. One of the most powerful exercises is simply observing your thoughts. Pay attention to what your mind says when opportunities appear. Pay attention to the excuses. Pay attention to the fears. Pay attention to the doubts. Many people are shocked by what they discover. They realize their biggest obstacle isn't the outside world. It's the conversation happening inside their own minds. The good news is that conversations can change. Thought patterns can change. Beliefs can change. Identity can change. Nothing is fixed. Another reason people remain stuck is emotional addiction. This idea may sound surprising. But many people become attached to emotional states. Even negative ones. Someone may become addicted to worry. Another person becomes addicted to chaos. Another becomes addicted to being a victim. Another becomes addicted to drama. Not because those emotions feel good. Because those emotions feel familiar. The brain starts expecting them. Seeking them. Recreating them. Without realizing it, people build lives that continuously generate the emotions they become accustomed to feeling. This explains why some individuals repeatedly encounter similar problems. Different circumstances. Different people. Same emotional experience. The pattern keeps repeating because the underlying issue remains unresolved. And this is where true transformation begins. Not by changing external circumstances first, but by changing internal patterns. Because wherever you go, you take yourself with you. You can change jobs, move cities, and relationships. Start businesses. But if the internal patterns remain unchanged, similar problems often return. The mountain follows you. That's why Brianna Wiest says the mountain isn't something outside of you. The mountain is you. The fears. The wounds. The beliefs. The habits. The emotional patterns. Those are the real obstacles. And the moment you stop running from them, something remarkable happens. You begin climbing. You begin growing. You begin transforming. But overcoming the mountain requires more than awareness. It requires understanding your emotions. Because emotions are not the enemy. In fact, many of the feelings people spend years avoiding are actually trying to teach them something important. For many years, people were taught that emotions are obstacles. If you're sad, hide it. If you're anxious, ignore it. If you're angry, push it down. If you're afraid, pretend you're not. The message was simple. Strong people control their emotions. But Brianna Wiest presents a very different perspective. She argues that emotions are not problems to eliminate. They are messages to understand. Every emotion carries information. Every feeling is trying to tell you something. The problem is that most people never learn how to listen. Instead, they spend years running from their emotions. They distract themselves. They stay busy. They scroll endlessly. They overwork. They overeat, they binge-watch shows. They do anything they can to avoid sitting with uncomfortable feelings. At first, this seems harmless. But avoided emotions don't disappear. They remain beneath the surface. And eventually, they begin influencing behavior in ways people don't even realize. Imagine a person who was constantly criticized growing up. Years later, they may still carry that emotional wound. Every time they receive feedback, they become defensive. Every time someone disagrees with them, they feel attacked. The reaction seems excessive. But the reaction isn't coming from the present moment. It's coming from an old wound that was never healed. This is why self-awareness is so powerful. When you understand your emotional triggers, you stop being controlled by them. Instead of automatically reacting, you begin asking questions. Why did that upset me? Why did that comment affect me so strongly? Why do I keep experiencing the same emotional patterns? Those questions create insight. And insight creates freedom. One of the most important ideas in the Mountain Eye. That healing isn't about becoming a completely different person. It's about becoming aware of the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. Many people think personal growth means adding something new. More confidence. More discipline. More motivation. Sometimes growth is actually the opposite. Sometimes growth means removing what no longer serves you. Removing outdated beliefs. Removing emotional baggage. Removing patterns that keep you stuck. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack up a mountain. Every step feels exhausting. You assume you need more strength. But what if the real solution is putting down unnecessary weight? Life works the same way. Many people don't need more effort. They need fewer internal burdens. Another powerful lesson from the book is the difference between reacting and responding. Most people react. Something happens. An emotion appears. They immediately act on it. They get angry. They quit. They avoid. They complain. They shut down. The entire process happens automatically. But emotionally intelligent people create space between the feeling and the action. They recognize the emotion. They observe it. They understand it. Then they choose how to respond. This may sound simple, but it can completely change your life. Imagine receiving criticism. An automatic reaction might be defensiveness. But a conscious response might be curiosity. Instead of becoming upset, you ask yourself whether there's something valuable to learn. The same event. A completely different outcome. This ability to pause is one of the most valuable skills a person can develop. Because emotions are temporary. But decisions often create permanent consequences. Brianna also discusses the importance of taking responsibility. Not blame. Responsibility. There's a difference. Blame focuses on the past. Responsibility focuses on the future. Blame asks, whose fault is this? Responsibility asks, what can I do now? Many people spend years trapped in blame. They blame their parents, their circumstances, their ex-partners, their bad luck, their past. And while some of those experiences may have genuinely hurt them, remaining trapped in blame prevents growth. Because the more power you give your past, the less power you have in the present. Responsibility is different. Responsibility says, I may not have caused everything that happened to me, but I can choose what happens next. That mindset changes everything. Because it shifts you from victimhood to empowerment. From helplessness to action. From surviving to growing. Another important concept is emotional regulation. Many people believe emotional strength means never feeling negative emotions. But that's impossible. Every human experiences sadness, fear, disappointment, anxiety, frustration, The goal isn't to eliminate those feelings. The goal is to navigate them effectively. Think about the ocean. You can't stop waves from forming, but you can learn how to ride them. Emotions work the same way. You can't control every feeling that appears, but you can control how you respond. And over time, that skill becomes life-changing. People who learn emotional regulation become more resilient. They recover faster from setbacks. They handle challenges more effectively. They stop allowing temporary emotions to dictate long-term decisions. This is where true confidence comes from. Not believing that nothing bad will happen, but trusting yourself to handle whatever happens. Confidence isn't the absence of fear. It's the belief that you'll be okay even when fear appears. That's a completely different way of thinking. And it's far more powerful. As Brianna Wiest explains, many of the emotions people fear most are actually invitations. Invitations to heal. Invitations to grow. Invitations to understand themselves more deeply. The emotions you've been avoiding may contain some of the most important lessons of your life. But only if you're willing to listen. As people begin developing emotional intelligence, something interesting happens. They stop fighting themselves. They stop viewing their emotions as enemies. They stop running from discomfort. Instead, they start working with themselves rather than against themselves. And that creates a foundation for lasting change. Because once you understand your emotions, you become much better at understanding your behaviors. And that's exactly where we're going next. Because many of the habits keeping people stuck aren't caused by laziness or lack of motivation. They're driven by deeper emotional patterns. By this point, you've probably realized something important. Most destructive habits don't start as habits. They start as solutions. Not good solutions. Not healthy solutions. But solutions nonetheless. A person procrastinates because avoiding a task temporarily reduces anxiety. Someone overthinks because they believe worrying will protect them from mistakes. Someone constantly seeks validation because they're trying to fill a deeper emotional need. The behavior may be harmful, but the intention behind it often makes sense. This is why simply trying to force yourself to stop a habit rarely works. If you don't address the need underneath the behavior, the habit usually returns. Imagine a weed growing in a garden. You can cut off the visible part. But if the roots remain, the weed grows back. Many people approach personal growth the same way. They attack the behavior, but they ignore the root, and that's why lasting change feels impossible. One of the most common forms of self-sabotage is procrastination. Most people think procrastination is a time management problem. Brianna Wiest argues it's often an emotional regulation problem. Think about a project you've been avoiding. Maybe it's starting a business, applying for a job, creating content, having a difficult conversation. The task itself may not be the real issue. The emotions attached to the task are often the issue. Fear of failure. Fear of judgment. Fear of rejection. Having a difficult conversation. The task itself may not be the real issue. The emotions attached to the task are often the issue: fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of not being good enough. Avoiding the task provides temporary relief. For a moment, the anxiety disappears. The problem is that relief becomes rewarding. Your brain learns a dangerous lesson. Avoidance equals comfort. And once that lesson is repeated enough times, procrastination becomes automatic. The solution isn't simply forcing yourself to work harder, the solution is learning how to tolerate discomfort, because growth always requires some discomfort. There's no way around it. Every successful person you've ever admired has experienced uncertainty, fear, doubt, embarrassment, failure. The difference is that they learned how to move forward anyway. Another major obstacle people face is overthinking. At first glance, overthinking seems productive. It feels like you're solving problems, analyzing situations, preparing for the future. But in reality, overthinking often creates the opposite effect. It keeps you stuck. Imagine standing at a crossroads. One path leads left. One path leads right. Instead of choosing, you spend weeks analyzing every possible outcome. Months pass. Nothing changes. The biggest mistake wasn't choosing the wrong path. It was refusing to move at all. Overthinking creates an illusion of progress. Your mind stays busy. But your life stays the same. Brianna explains that clarity often comes from action, not thought. Many people wait until they're completely certain before taking a step. But certainty rarely arrives first. Action creates certainty. Experience creates confidence. Movement creates clarity. The people who grow aren't always the people with the best plans. They're often the people willing to begin before they feel ready. Fear-based decision-making creates another destructive cycle. When fear becomes your primary advisor, life becomes smaller. You stop taking risks. You avoid challenges. You reject opportunities. You choose comfort over possibility. And while this may protect you from temporary discomfort, it also protects you from growth. Imagine if every major decision was based on fear. You'd never start the business. Never ask the person out. Never apply for the job. Never move to the new city. Never pursue the dream. Your world would gradually shrink. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happens to many people. Not because they're incapable. Because they're afraid. Brianna encourages readers to ask a powerful question whenever fear appears. Is this fear protecting me or limiting me? Sometimes fear is useful. It keeps you safe from genuine danger. But many modern fears aren't protecting you from danger. They're protecting you from growth. And that's a very different thing. Another destructive habit discussed in the book is negative thinking. Many people assume their thoughts are objective reflections of reality. But thoughts are often interpretations, not facts. Imagine two people experiencing the exact same setback. One sees it as proof they're a failure. The other sees it as a learning opportunity. Same event. Different interpretation. Different outcome. The meaning you assign to experiences shapes your reality. That's why becoming aware of your thought patterns is so important. Not every thought deserves belief. Not every fear deserves obedience. Not every inner voice tells the truth. Some thoughts are simply old stories repeating themselves, and once you recognize them as stories, their power begins to fade. Brianna also emphasizes that transformation requires consistency. Many people search for breakthroughs. They want one life-changing moment that fixes everything. One realization. One strategy. One magical solution. But real change usually happens differently. It happens through small actions repeated consistently. A single healthy choice may not change your life. But thousands of healthy choices may not change your life. But thousands of healthy choices will. A single courageous decision may not transform everything. But repeated courage will. The mountain isn't conquered in one giant leap. It's conquered one step at a time. One decision. One habit. One action. One day. Then another. And another. Until eventually you look back and realize you've become someone completely different. This is where hope begins. Because if your current life was created through repeated patterns, a better life can be created through new patterns. You don't need to transform overnight. You only need to move in the right direction consistently. As destructive habits begin losing their power, another challenge emerges. You can no longer rely on your old identity. The version of yourself that created your current reality cannot fully create your future reality. Growth requires becoming someone new. Not pretending. Not acting. Actually evolving. At some point in every transformation journey, a person realizes something powerful. The biggest obstacle isn't the past. It isn't other people. It isn't lack of opportunity. It's the identity they've been carrying. Most people try to change their lives while holding on to the same version of themselves. They want different results without becoming different people. And that's where progress stops. Think about it. Every action you take is connected to how you see yourself. If you believe you're confident, you'll behave differently. If you believe you're capable, you'll take bigger risks. If you believe you're worthy, you'll stop settling for less. Your identity quietly influences every decision you make. That's why Brianna Wiest argues that lasting transformation isn't about changing what you do. It's about changing who you believe you are. Imagine someone who has spent years telling themselves they're not disciplined. Every time they miss a workout, they say, "See? That's just who I am." Every time they procrastinate, they reinforce the same story. The behavior strengthens the identity. The identity strengthens the behavior. And the cycle continues. But here's the truth. Your identity is not fixed. It's not something you were born with. It's something you've built through repetition. Which means it can be rebuilt. One of the most powerful shifts a person can make is moving from a fixed identity to a growing identity. Instead of saying, "I'm not confident," they begin saying, "I'm learning confidence." Instead of saying, "I'm bad with money," they say, "I'm becoming financially responsible." Instead of saying, "I'm not successful," they say, "I'm building success." Notice the difference. The first statements create limitations. The second statements create possibilities. Growth begins when you stop treating your current situation as your permanent identity. Because where you are is not who you are. Many people confuse the two. A failure becomes, "I am a failure." A mistake becomes, "I am broken." A setback becomes, "I am incapable." But experiences do not define identity. They provide information. Nothing more. Nothing less. Another important lesson from the book is that confidence is often misunderstood. People think confidence comes first. They believe successful people take action because they're confident. But in reality, confidence usually comes after action. Think about learning to ride a bike. Nobody starts confident. Confidence develops through experience. The same is true for public speaking, business, relationships, leadership, and personal growth. Action creates evidence. Evidence creates belief. Belief creates confidence. Waiting for confidence before taking action keeps people trapped. The people who grow are often scared, nervous, uncertain. They simply move forward anyway. And every small victory changes how they see themselves. Over time, a new identity begins to form. Another key idea Brianna discusses is self-respect. Many people chase confidence without building self-respect. The two are connected, but they're not identical. Confidence is believing you can. Self-respect is believing you deserve better. Self-respect changes standards. It changes boundaries. It changes decisions. A person with self-respect stops tolerating things that damage their well-being. They stop accepting excuses from themselves. They stop staying in situations that consistently harm them. Not because they're arrogant. Because they value themselves. And that value influences every choice they make. Imagine two people facing the same challenge. One sees themselves as powerless. The other sees themselves as capable. Who is more likely to take action? Who is more likely to persist? Who is more likely to succeed? The difference isn't necessarily talent. It's identity. People act in alignment with who they believe they are. This is why transformation often feels uncomfortable. You're not just changing habits. You're changing your self-image. You're becoming unfamiliar to yourself. And that process can feel strange. Sometimes even scary. Part of you wants to move forward. Another part wants to return to what's familiar. This internal conflict is normal. In fact, it's often a sign that real growth is happening. The old identity is losing control. The new identity is beginning to emerge. Brianna explains that becoming your future self requires grieving your former self. That means letting go of old stories, old labels, old limitations, old excuses, old versions of yourself. Not because they were evil, but because you've outgrown them. Think about climbing a mountain. The higher you go, the more things you leave behind. You can't carry unnecessary weight forever. The same is true emotionally. Growth requires release. And every time you release an outdated belief, you create space for something stronger. This process doesn't happen overnight. It happens through daily choices, daily actions, daily evidence. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, your identity changes. Small actions create powerful transformations. Most people underestimate how much they can change in a year. They focus on immediate results. But identity grows gradually, quietly, consistently. Then one day, they look back and realize they're no longer the same person. And that's one of the most beautiful parts of personal growth. You don't become someone else. You become more of who you were always capable of being. But understanding these concepts is only part of the journey. The next step is seeing how they work in real life. Because ideas become much more powerful when you watch them play out through real experiences. Let's bring these ideas into the real world. Because it's easy to talk about self-sabotage in theory. It's much harder to recognize it in your own life. Imagine a young professional named Sarah. She's talented, hardworking, and ambitious. Everyone around her believes she has a bright future. Whenever a promotion opportunity appears, her managers encourage her to apply, but she never does. She tells herself she needs more experience, more knowledge, more preparation. A year passes, then another. Less qualified people move ahead while Sarah remains exactly where she started. From the outside, it looks confusing. But underneath the surface, something else is happening. Sarah isn't afraid of failure. She's afraid of success. Success would bring more responsibility, more visibility, more expectations, and deep down, part of her doesn't believe she's ready. So she unconsciously protects herself by staying small, not because she's incapable. Because she's scared. The moment she recognizes that fear, everything changes. She stops waiting to feel ready. She applies anyway. The promotion isn't what changes her life, the decision to stop sabotaging herself is. Now imagine a different situation. A man named Michael wants to start a business. For years he talks about it. He watches videos, reads books, takes courses. He's constantly preparing. At least that's what he tells herself. She needs more experience, more knowledge, more preparation. A year passes. Then another. Less qualified people move ahead while Sarah remains exactly where she started. From the outside, it looks confusing. But underneath the surface, something else is happening. Sarah isn't afraid of failure. She's afraid of success. Success would bring more responsibility, more visibility, more expectations. And deep down, part of her doesn't believe she's ready. So she unconsciously protects herself by staying small. Not because she's incapable. Because she's scared. The moment she recognizes that fear, everything changes. She stops waiting to feel ready. She applies anyway. The promotion isn't what changes her life. The decision to stop sabotaging herself is. Now imagine a different situation. A man named Michael wants to start a business. For years he talks about it. He watches videos, reads books, takes courses. He's constantly preparing. At least that's what he tells himself. In reality, preparation has become a hiding place. The more he learns, the safer he feels. Because as long as he's preparing, he never has to risk failure. He never has to face rejection. He never has to discover whether his idea will actually work. One day he realizes something painful. He isn't preparing anymore. He's avoiding. That realization becomes a turning point. Instead of consuming more information, he takes action. The first steps aren't perfect. Some mistakes happen. Some plans fail. But for the first time, he's moving. And movement creates momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence creates growth. This pattern appears everywhere. Think about relationships. Many people say they want love. Yet whenever someone genuinely cares about them, they pull away. They become distant. They find flaws. They create problems. They sabotage the connection. Why? Because intimacy requires vulnerability. And vulnerability feels dangerous. Especially for people who have been hurt before. Part of them wants love. Another part wants protection. The conflict creates self-sabotage. Until they heal the fear underneath it. The pattern continues. Different people. Different situations. Same emotional struggle. This is why Brianna Wiest repeatedly emphasizes that self-awareness changes everything. The moment you understand the real reason behind a behavior, you stop fighting symptoms and start addressing causes. Another example comes from confidence. Most people believe confident people are fearless. They're not. They simply have a different relationship with fear. Imagine two individuals standing at the edge of an opportunity. Both feel nervous. Both feel uncertain. Both hear doubts inside their minds. The first person listens to the fear and retreats. The second person feels the same fear but moves forward anyway. Months later, their lives look completely different. Not because one person lacked fear. Because one person refused to let fear make decisions. That's a lesson worth remembering. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is action despite fear. And every act of courage strengthens identity. Every courageous choice becomes evidence. Evidence that you're capable. Evidence that you're stronger than you thought. Evidence that growth is possible. Brianna also talks about people who spend years waiting for life to feel easy. They believe that once they heal enough, learn enough, or improve enough, challenges will disappear. But life doesn't work that way. Growth creates new challenges. Success creates new challenges. Relationships create new challenges. Every level of life contains obstacles. The goal isn't to eliminate challenges. The goal is becoming the kind of person who can handle them. That's the real transformation. Not changing the mountain. Changing yourself. Because eventually you realize something profound. The mountain was never trying to stop you. The mountain was trying to strengthen you. Every fear revealed a weakness that needed attention. Every setback exposed an area that needed growth. Every challenge forced you to become more resilient. What felt like punishment was often preparation. What felt like resistance was often training. And when people finally understand this, their perspective changes. They stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" That single shift can transform an entire life. Because growth becomes easier when every challenge contains a lesson. Every obstacle contains information. Every difficulty contains opportunity. The mountain stops feeling like an enemy. It becomes a teacher. And once you reach that point, something remarkable happens. You stop trying to escape your life. You start building it. You stop running from discomfort. You start learning from it. You stop seeing yourself as broken. You start seeing yourself as capable of growth. And that's exactly where true transformation begins. Now that we've explored the psychology behind self-sabotage, emotional healing, identity change, and real-life transformation, it's time for the most practical part of this entire summary. Because understanding these ideas is powerful. But applying them is what? So how do you actually apply everything you've learned from the mountain is you? How do you stop repeating the same patterns and start creating real change? Brianna Wiest suggests that transformation begins with awareness, but it becomes real through action. The first step is identifying your biggest pattern of self-sabotage. Ask yourself a simple question. What problem keeps showing up in my life again and again? Maybe it's procrastination. Maybe it's unhealthy relationships. Maybe it's fear of failure. Maybe it's low self-worth. Maybe it's constantly abandoning goals. Whatever it is, stop focusing on the symptom and start looking for the cause. The pattern is usually trying to protect you from something. Fear, rejection, embarrassment, disappointment, loss. Once you identify what you're actually afraid of, the behavior begins making sense. And what makes sense can be changed. The second step is learning to sit with discomfort. Most self-sabotage exists because people are trying to avoid uncomfortable emotions. But growth requires discomfort. There is no successful person who avoided every uncomfortable feeling. Every achievement requires uncertainty. Every transformation requires challenge. Every breakthrough requires discomfort. The goal isn't to eliminate discomfort. The goal is to stop running from it. When anxiety appears, stay present. When fear appears, stay present. When doubt appears, stay present. You don't need to obey every emotion you feel. You only need to experience it without letting it control you. The third step is questioning your beliefs. Many people spend years living according to beliefs they never consciously chose. I'm not good enough. I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm not smart enough. I always fail. I can't change. But are those facts? Or are they stories? Most limiting beliefs fall apart when examined closely. They're often conclusions created during emotional moments. And what was learned can be unlearned. Start challenging the stories you've been telling yourself. You may discover that many of them were never true. The fourth step is acting before you feel ready. This might be the most important lesson in the entire book. People often wait for confidence before taking action. But confidence comes from action. Not before it. Not during it. After it. Take the first step. Then another. Then another. Small actions create evidence. Evidence creates belief. Belief creates confidence. Confidence creates momentum. And momentum changes lives. The fifth step is becoming emotionally responsible. This means understanding that while you cannot control everything that happens, you can control how you respond. Life will never be perfect. People will disappoint you. Plans will fail. Unexpected challenges will appear. But your power exists in your response. The stronger your response, the stronger your future becomes. Emotionally responsible people stop asking why life is unfair. They ask how they can grow. That shift changes everything. The sixth step is creating a future identity. Instead of focusing only on goals, focus on the person capable of achieving those goals. Ask yourself, how does that person think? How does that person behave? What habits do they have? What standards do they maintain? Then begin practicing those behaviors now. Not someday. Today. Identity changes through repetition. Every action is a vote for the person you're becoming. The seventh step is patience. Most people quit because change feels slower than expected. But mountains aren't climbed in a day. Neither is personal growth. Some days will feel easy. Others will feel difficult. Some days you'll feel motivated. Others you won't. Keep going anyway. Consistency beats intensity. Always. The people who transform their lives aren't necessarily the most talented. They're often the most persistent. One decision. One habit. One day at a time. That's how real change happens. And eventually, something amazing occurs. The fears that once controlled you become smaller. The habits that once trapped you become weaker. The beliefs that once limited you lose their power. You begin trusting yourself. You begin respecting yourself. You begin becoming the person you've always wanted to be. Not because life became easier. Because you became stronger. And that's the real message of the mountain is you. The mountain was your opportunity. Your opportunity to grow. Your opportunity to heal. Your opportunity to evolve. Your opportunity to discover who you truly are. And once you realize that, you stop seeing obstacles as roadblocks. You start seeing them as stepping stones. You stop asking why the journey is difficult. You start understanding that the difficulty is part of the journey. Because every mountain worth climbing changes the person who climbs it. And the mountain within you is no different. Now that we've built the complete action plan, there's one final lesson left to explore. As we approach the end of this journey, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Because The Mountain is You is much more than a book about self-sabotage. It's a book about transformation. It's a book about understanding yourself deeply enough to finally stop standing in your own way. Throughout this summary, we've uncovered a powerful truth. Most people are not limited by their potential. They're limited by the patterns they've repeated for years. Patterns of fear. Patterns of avoidance. Patterns of self-doubt. Patterns of emotional survival. The tragedy is that many people mistake these patterns for their personality. They believe, this is just who I am. But Brianna Wiest reminds us that who you are and what you've practiced are not the same thing. A habit is not an identity. A fear is not an identity. A wound is not an identity. A mistake is not an identity. Those things are experiences. And experiences can change. One of the most important lessons from this book is that self-sabotage is rarely random. People don't destroy their own happiness because they're broken. They do it because part of them is trying to meet a need. Trying to stay safe. Trying to avoid pain. Trying to protect them from something they fear. Once you understand that, you stop judging yourself. And you start understanding yourself. That shift is incredibly powerful. Because change becomes much easier when you replace self-hatred with self-awareness. Another major lesson is that awareness alone isn't enough. You can understand every problem in your life. You can recognize every limiting belief. You can identify every emotional trigger. But if you never take action, nothing changes. Knowledge opens the door. Action walks through it. That's why courage matters so much. Not because courageous people aren't afraid. Because they refuse to let fear make decisions for them. Think about every major breakthrough you've ever had. Every important relationship. Every opportunity. Every achievement. At some point, courage was required. You had to move despite uncertainty. You had to trust yourself despite doubt. You had to act before you felt completely ready. And that's still true today. The future you're hoping for will almost certainly require courage. Not once. Repeatedly. Another key lesson from the book is that emotions are messengers, not enemies. Many people spend years fighting their emotions. Trying to suppress them. Ignore them. Escape them. But emotions carry valuable information. They reveal wounds that need healing. Needs that require attention. Patterns that deserve awareness. The more you understand your emotions, the less power they have over you. And the less power they have over you, the more freedom you gain. We've also learned that identity shapes reality. The way you see yourself influences the choices you make. The risks you take. The standards you maintain. The opportunities you pursue. If you continue identifying with an outdated version of yourself, you'll continue creating outdated results. Growth requires updating your identity. It requires becoming someone new. Not overnight, but gradually. Through consistent actions. Consistent choices. Consistent evidence. The beautiful thing about identity is that it's never finished. You are not a completed project. You are an ongoing process. Every day gives you another opportunity to evolve. Another opportunity to grow. another opportunity to become. And perhaps the most powerful lesson of all is hidden within the title itself. The mountain is you. At first, that statement sounds intimidating. It sounds like you're the problem. But by now, you understand the deeper meaning. If the mountain is you, then the solution is also you. If the obstacle is within you, then the power is within you too. That changes everything. Because it means your future is not determined by your past. It's determined by what you choose to do next. Every day presents a new choice. A choice between fear and courage. Comfort and growth. Avoidance and action. Excuses and responsibility. The choices may seem small in the moment. But over time, they create completely different lives. The people who transform themselves aren't necessarily the smartest, the richest, or the luckiest. They're often the people who consistently choose growth. One decision at a time. One habit at a time. One day at a time. And eventually, those small choices create extraordinary change. That's the real promise of this book. Not instant transformation. Not magical success. Real transformation. The kind that lasts. The kind that changes who you are. The kind that helps you build a life you're proud of. So before we finish, ask yourself a simple question. What mountain am I avoiding right now? What fear keeps showing up? What pattern keeps repeating? What belief keeps holding me back? Be honest. Because the answer to that question may reveal the exact path toward your next level of growth. And once you identify the mountain, don't run from it. Don't avoid it. Don't pretend it isn't there. Climb it. One step at a time. Because on the other side of that mountain is a stronger version of you. A wiser version of you. A more confident version of you. A more fulfilled version of you. The person you've been capable of becoming all along. And that person is waiting. Not someday. Starting now. Before you leave this video, remember one thing: you are not broken, you are not stuck forever, and you are not destined to repeat the same patterns for the rest of your life. Every person you've ever admired had fears. They had doubts, they had insecurities. They faced setbacks. The difference is that at some point, they stopped allowing those things to control their future, and you can do the same. With the mountain in your life may feel overwhelming right now. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's self-doubt, maybe it's a habit you've been trying to break for years, maybe it's a version of yourself you've outgrown but haven't fully let go of. Whatever it is, remember this: mountains are not meant to stop you. They're meant to reveal your strength. Every challenge you face is an opportunity to grow. Every setback contains a lesson. Every difficult moment is preparing you for the person you're becoming. The goal isn't to become fearless, the goal is to move forward even when fear is present. The goal isn't to have all the answers, the goal is to take the next step. One step, one choice, one day at a time, because that's how transformation happens, not in a single moment, but through hundreds of small decisions that slowly change the direction of your life. A year from now, you could be living a completely different reality. More confident, more disciplined, more fulfilled, more at peace. But that future version of you depends on the choices you make today. So don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until you feel completely ready. Don't wait until fear disappears. Start now. Take the first step, then keep climbing. Because the person waiting on the other side of that mountain is worth every challenge you'll face along the way. If you enjoyed this book summary and found value in it, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more powerful book summaries, self-improvement lessons, mindset shifts, and life-changing ideas from the world's best books. And let me know in the comments. What is the biggest mountain you're currently trying to overcome in your life? I'd love to read your answers. Thank you so much for watching. Keep learning. Keep growing. Keep becoming the person you're meant to be. And remember, the mountain is not your enemy. The mountain is your path. See you in the next video.